What is up, team? Nala here. I wanted to run you guys through our Everbloom challenge mode run. So Everbloom proved to be one of the more difficult challenge modes for us. In fact, the most difficult to date. We thought it was going to be Skyreach or Ubers, but no, it was Everbloom. So the reason Everbloom is so hard is because the more ranged you have, the more scattered your aggro gets, and the sheer size of the pulls that you're doing, if there's stray mobs here and there, it's going to make your healer's life a lot easier. So the three really big trash pulls that you're doing here are a lot of mobs and are very stressful for healers. So you need to make sure that you're on point with your stun rotations, on point with your CC, and on point with your dispels, because there's a lot of sort of just peripheral things to look out for. So as you just saw right there at the very beginning, we mount up, ran through, pulled all the trash up to the jump up point that you can see on the right hand side of or in the center of the screen right now. And then we additionally pulled the group just to the left of it. So we got 8 of our 30 needed mobs, and then we do the jump, we kick our little vendor mobs off the mounts, we get everyone up top, and after that, you're just on to the next trash wave. So the very first wave of trash, we had our healer blow all sorts of cooldowns, and we blew all of our personal DPS cooldowns. Mage blew Crystal, I blew Ascendance, and our Hunter went crazy with Barrage all the time. So the other thing that we did was round up, despite being stunned for long periods of time, was round up half of these caster ads, the water people that are protecting the tree. Now the water people are very dangerous if you let them cast, because the channeled spell that they do, Barrage of Leaves, hurts a lot more than it should. So if you get Barrage of Leaves, a couple casts on one person, if you could see right there, I had 2 casts on me and my health is spiking down pretty steadily. So I'm actually taking more damage than the tank for these pulls because of the way that the targeting works. It's a random selected target, so your healer needs to make sure that they're on point with their cleave healing. This is why Resto Druids are so good for these fights, as well as Dispels, because if you miss an interrupt on Naturalists, which are the people who channel Barrage of Leaves and Choking Vines, which is more likely because you need to be focusing your interrupts on the Menders, the 2 types of mobs in here. The Menders have an almost 60% heal that they just cast on various targets, and so if you're missing interrupts on them, these pulls are going to be almost impossible for you to do. So you can round up all 3 groups. We just didn't want to risk. We wanted to play a little safe when we've been tinkering around with the timings of different things. We wanted to make sure that we had just the right number of mobs to where our healer, who didn't have any cooldowns because he blew tree and everything on the first pull, would be able to heal through it quite comfortably, while at the same time allowing us to get the time that we wanted. So that brings us to the first boss, Witherbark. Witherbark is a really straightforward fight. If you can see these 3 raid markers that we put down here, each of them are relative, again, not exact, but relative stack points per ranged, because at 50% health, or whenever he runs out of water, which for us was actually at 80% health, he gets Brittle Bark, takes 100% increased damage, and water globules will slowly flow from the river, or from the pond that's in the back of the room, up to the boss. Now, we spread out our range like this because the little water globules can, instead of hitting the boss and getting rid of this very, very high increased damage phase, they can hit these ads and spawn little ads, which you can basically just ignore because they don't hit that hard, and it lets you do more damage to the boss. So by all means, spread out your ranged little semicircle around him so that you can get as many water globules hitting the patches on the ground instead of the boss, so that he can stay in that 100% increased damage phase. We recommend blowing Hero here for the express purpose of the boss has a lot of health, and so even though he's taking 100% increased damage, you want to make sure that you're very, very on point with your DPS on that fight. So we benched that at around 4 minutes to kill. Our fastest one at that time, which we ended up having to clear because we wiped on the mages up here shortly thereafter, was 3.5 minutes. So that was a little bit slower for us, but again, not unmanageable. So this pull right here, and just kind of the chaining of these pulls proved to be the hardest for us because of all of the dots going out and all of the random spells that can sometimes get cast at people. If you're not on point with your stuns, if you're not on point with your interrupts, and if you don't have a Death Knight constantly Dark Simulacruming Dragon's Breath, which will disorient you and do a ton of damage, you're going to die. And you're going to die really quick. So what we did is we went ahead and blew up the fire ads, which are the putrid pyromancers. There are 3 of them up here in total. We pulled the first group, which had 1 pyromancer, and a bunch of different astromancers, or I believe it's astromancer, pyromasters, ice callers, and astromancers. We killed the first pyromancer so that we would only have to be dealing with 1 dragon's breath ad at a time, and as soon as he was down, we went over and we gore fiends the rest of the ads together, and then continued our stun rotation. So if you go forward with that strategy, it's not that bad to focus on nuking down the ads in little groups as opposed to all together. What your healer really has to watch out for is going to be dispels, and again, as before, with every single trash pull in here, stun, 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 stun the ads, because if you don't, you will just die. So for this boss, you're not going to have any heroes, any large cooldowns to throw out, because you just use them on Wither Breath. That being said, this boss doesn't have nearly as much health, and you just need to nuke her down before you get to phase 3. Now, the very important part about this boss is making sure, A, that you don't stand in any swirlies on the ground, or near flowers, because flowers on a certain cast will give you these dissipating fire waves, which you can see now, which you need to jump over or you'll take a lot of raid damage. There are also these little green swirlies that spawn on the ground. Those are just environmental effects that you have to dodge, and it's avoidable damage. She has this cast, which she's casting right now, Parasitic Growth. Parasitic Growth just greatly increases her cast speed. It gives her like 50% haste or something absurd. It's interruptible. Don't interrupt it, because if you interrupt it, leave it to your tank, and you should only ever interrupt 1. We let her get to 2 stacks, and then we interrupted it. Because every time you interrupt it, she phases to a different type of magic. The fire phase, which is the first phase of this fight, is the easiest phase. Sure, you get lots of flowers, but you can just jump over it. It's completely avoidable damage. The frost phase hurts about as much as the fire phase. However, when you combine the fire AoEs with Blizzard, she gains Blizzard in that phase, it ends up being a lot of damage that you have to heal through. And if you interrupt Parasitic Growth 3 times, you end up in Arcane phase and you just die. So don't do that, please. But again, just blow cooldowns, nuke the boss, don't stand in things. Very straightforward fight. The third fight in here, the council fight, was a little bit harder for us. Now, it's very important to note, we learned this while we were going through, these are stunnable. So if you want to run things like Shockwave, run things like Remorseless Winter, wouldn't recommend Remorseless, but it's an option. Cap Totem, Binding Shot, all of these are options for stunning the bosses, and it makes the fight a lot easier. The kill priority for this fight is going to be Life Warden Gola, who has a casted heal, which we just failed to interrupt, and which ultimately made us kill the wrong mob first, just in the nature of how our damage cleaves. We're a very cleave-heavy comp, just with a Shaman and a Frost Mage. So with Prismatic Crystal, Chain Lightning, and Earthquake, we were able to nuke down the other ad first. Now, what's important in this fight is going to be Dark Simulacrum again. You can Dark Simulacrum Bramble Patch, which is cast by the second Ancient Protector, who's kind of off to the side at the beginning. Bramble Patch does a huge amount of AoE damage and can actually be stolen and placed directly under your current target. So if you stack up all 3 mobs and you run Bramble Patch, your Death Knight will be doing absurd damage. And as you can see, our Death Knight was second in damage for this fight, as he is for most fights. He's very good at his job. So you need to make sure that you're stealing that and that you're putting it under the bosses, otherwise this fight takes a really long time. The other very important thing to interrupt, in addition to Revitalizing Waters, which is cast by Life Warden Gola, is it's like Adaptive Tides. It's whatever his other cast is, which gives the mob that it's cast on the ability to spam their special ability. So if it's cast on himself, he will actually just spam Revitalizing Waters. He will constantly spam it, and that needs to be dispelled immediately. Preferable to the dispel strat would be interrupts, because he can cast it on anyone. If he casts it on the other caster, you just get Bramble Patches. You get Bramble Patches everywhere and you end up run out of space. And if he casts it on the large tank, you just get Slash everywhere and knocks explosion, everywhere. And that's something that you just can't deal with, so you have to make sure that you're interrupting that, and if you do accidentally let a cast go through, you need to make sure that you're purging as well. Now, the other thing that's different from from normal, heroic, and mythic to challenge modes is that the spider boss, Zyrtac, is actually mandatory in challenge modes. As you saw as we walked in, you skip that giant spider ad because it has so much health that if you try and kill it, you will just die. You will not get gold. There's no way for you to kill that mob and get it in the mob count with enough time to actually finish this fight because of just the sheer amount of health that that mob has. So jump down like we did, walk around the side, and you'll be able to get in here with no problem. We'll show you where you get the last 3 mobs shortly after this boss, but this boss is very, very straightforward. You kill the ads, you kill the crazed ones. Make sure when you're picking up the crazed pale ones that you don't kite them through these little green patches on the ground, because if you kite them into there, they transform into larger ads with a lot more health that are harder to kill. You can kind of ignore those large ads, but eventually they're not CCable. And by CCable I mean Polytrap, Hex, and that is very important for the second part of the phase where Zyrtac actually comes down from the ceiling, because you'll continue to get these crazed pale ones through that phase of the fight. And what's important is Zyrtac has this ability where she starts to, I think it's called Consume, it's either Consume or something of that ilk, but she'll basically latch on to one of the ads, and well, I'm not sure what that was. She'll latch on to one of the ads and start healing off of it. You normally would have to kill the ad, but if you have a mage, a shaman, a hunter, and I believe Shadow Priest with Horrify can do this as well. You can trap, hex, poly, or horrify the ad, and she will stop casting on it because it's immune to damage, and mobs don't usually attack things that are immune to damage. Or not immune to damage, but it would break the effect on damage, and so because it's viewed as a friendly target to the mob, they try not to break it. So that'll stop her cast, stop her from healing, and you'll see us go ahead and do that up here shortly. But the only other thing that you really need to avoid is interrupting Venomous Sting. At one point we ground Venomous Sting, or in a different run, not this run, we grounded Venomous Sting and let our DK try and steal it. Didn't end up working out too well, so we just went ahead and made sure to interrupt all of those casts and just burn down the boss. Again, you're blowing personal cooldowns only here, and you're saving hero for the last boss in here because he's got so much health. So that's Zyrtac, very, very straightforward. Try not to let any Venomous Stings go out like we just did, because if you watch here, even though we're not in the fight anymore, I'm still taking about 25% of my health a tick. And with just a couple rejubes on me, it's not really enough to get the job done. So you gotta come up to these stairs, and when you're coming out, you gotta be careful because you have to look at where the spider is. You really, really do not want to aggro the spider just because of the sheer amount of time that it takes to kill. So while it's just one mob, and it would be easy to down, you're gonna lose a lot of time. So you can actually jump back down the way you came in. You can't get all the way up, but what you can do is you can jump down here to where the council fight was, the Ancient Protectors, and run back up and around and to the last boss. Now, the reason that you kill the Archmage Saul second is so that you don't have to run up and down this 4 times, A, and B, so that by the time you get up here, the vines that are the assistant mage, whoever the apprentice is, apprentice starts with a V, will have already been broken, so you can just walk into that last fight. Now, as you noticed, we hadn't hit our mob count yet, and so this is where we went ahead and did that with these last 3 mage mobs who spawn up here. There's the 2 that patrol back and forth, and then the one that sits over in this little tent here. So those make up the last 3 mobs for our mob count and bring us up to 30. So as soon as we get that, you don't have to kill the spore image. It's very important. The spore images do not count to mob count, nor do you need to kill them. So once you kill the 3 mobs, completely ignore the spore images and go kill the boss, because you'll be kind of pressed for time at this point. So the boss doesn't aggro per se if no one moves when you walk through that portal. So if you're not sure that people are going to make it there on time, go ahead and do that. But otherwise, make sure that you're pulling him as soon as possible and nuking him ASAP. Now, two very important mechanics in this fight. One, Entanglement, which you just saw. Entanglement will target either a friendly player or one of the little mages standing around him in a circle. Regardless of who it targets, you want to break it out. We had our hunter and mage break out the first one, and then I broke out the second one. And the reason that you even break the mages out is because A, you're less likely to get targeted with an entanglement in the future. B, it's more damage. The mages do a surprisingly large amount of damage to the boss and to ads, so the more of them that are out, the better. The second thing, which you'll have just seen, was Genesis. We completely ignored standing on flowers. Our DK, who knows how to stay alive, said that he could handle the pressure, and so we let him go ahead and just pick all those up when they spawned, and we AoE'd them down. Again, this was possible because we're a very AoE-intensive comp. However, this is not always doable. Now, this was not the cleanest kill for us, which you'll see in a minute here. But nonetheless, you just got to make sure that you're breaking mages out of entanglement. You got to make sure that you're dodging colossal blows, and you got to make sure that you're bleeding down it. At one point, our Death Knight gets root starved. It's coming up here. And it was not during Genesis, but during a podling phase. So now and again, Font of Life will sprout these little podling guys. And because of the sheer amount of AoE damage that I do, I often get them. And as you can see, they put a stacking debuff on you that does very high amounts of bleed damage. I just heroed there for a mage who died, got hit by a colossal blow, and we had to battle red. So you got to make sure that you're picking those podlings up, because if they hit anyone except for the tank, they will just die. I only got 4 stacks, so it was possible for me to survive. Again, possible is very different than plausible. So again, here come the podlings. They just ran through my earthquake, and immediately I just die. So I blew Recarn because we were very, very close here, and we knew we needed to nuke the boss down. So those podlings do a lot of damage. You need to make sure that you get them down ASAP. You could put them into a stun rotation. However, at this point, we were just trying to burn the boss. So we got him to 0%. Death Knight finished him off. That's that. Again, very much not a clean kill, but it worked, goddammit. So I'll take it.